Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. WitchLit is brought to you by 1000 Volt Press, an independent, family-owned, digital and print-on-demand publisher of books we want to see in the world. If you'd like to support WitchLit and 1000 Volt Press, the best way to do that is buy our books. Our most recent title is Pagan Roots, Reclaiming Concepts of the Sacred by Yvonne Aburrow. Other titles include A Death in the Dry River by Lisa Allen Agostini, Conjuring the Commonplace by Lane Fuller and Corey Thomas Hutchison, Changing Paths by Yvonne Aburrow, and my most recent novel, Verona Green, A Story of Art and Magic. Head over to 1000voltpress.com/store or wherever you buy books. You can also support the show by buying us a cup of coffee at ko-fi.com/witchlitpodcast. All links can be found in the show notes. Listening, subscribing, and leaving a rating is also an excellent way to support the podcast, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Next month, I'll be reading and discussing Judith Merkle Riley's The Oracle Glass with author and tarot deck creator Charles Harrington. The Oracle Glass was published in 1995. I was able to get a copy from my local library as an ebook. There's also an audiobook available from Apple and Audible, and you might be able to find and request that from your local library. The Oracle Glass is also available to purchase from bookshop.org as an ebook and a paperback, and I'm sure it's available in almost anywhere else you usually buy books. But that's for next month. This month, I'm talking to Aidan Wachter about Charles Godfrey Leland's Aradia, so let's jump right into that. Hi, and welcome to WitchLit. This is Victoria, your host, and today I am honored to have Aidan Wachter as my guest, and we are going to talk about Charles Godfrey Leland's Aradia. So before we get started, I'm going to give you a little background information about Leland and about the book, just in case this is new information for you, and then we'll jump in. So from the Encyclopedia Britannica, Charles Godfrey Leland was an American poet and journalist, best known for the Hans Breitmann ballads. Leland studied for 2 years in Germany, where he became fascinated with German culture. On his return to America, he studied and then practiced law. In 1853, he turned to journalism and worked for a number of years on Barnum's Illustrated News, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin, and Vanity Fair. After inheriting his father's estate in 1869, Leland abandoned journalism, preferring to pursue his interest in folklore, mysticism, and the occult. I really feel like the writers of the Encyclopedia Britannica glossed over why we're here to talk about Leland. So I have a little bit more information from Wikipedia. So Leland returned to Europe in 1869 and traveled widely, eventually settling in London. His fame during his lifetime did rest chiefly on the Hans Breitmann ballads, written in a combination of broken English and German, which is often confused with Pennsylvania Deutsch, which it's not. In recent times, his writings on pagan and Indo-Iranian traditions have eclipsed the now largely forgotten ballads, influencing the development of Wicca and modern paganism, which I think is more to the point. In his travels, he made a study of the Romani, on which he wrote more than one book. Leland began to publish a number of books on ethnography, folklore, and language. His writings on Algonquin and Romani culture were part of the contemporary interest in pagan and Indo-Iranian traditions. Scholars have found Leland has taken significant liberties with his research. In his book, The Algonquin Legends of New England, Leland attempts to link Wabanaki culture and history to the Norse. He erroneously claimed to have discovered the fifth Celtic tongue, the form of cant spoken among Irish travelers, which he called Shelta. In 1899, Godfrey produced Aradia, or the Gospel of the Witches, reportedly containing the traditional beliefs of Italian witchcraft as conveyed to him in a manuscript provided by a woman named Maddalena, whom he refers to as his witch informant. This remains his most influential book. Aradia's accuracy has been disputed and used by others as a study of witch lore in the 19th century Italy. So what Leland has to say about his own book, which I thought that was better than reading kind of somebody else's synopsis of it. This is what Leland has to say in Aradia about the book. The Gospel of the Witches, as I have given it, is in reality only the initial chapter of the collection of ceremonies, cantrips, incantations, and traditions current in the fraternity or sisterhood, the whole of which are in the main to be found in my Etruscan Roman remains and Florentine legends, two other books that he wrote. I have, it is true, a great number as yet unpublished, and there are more ungathered, but the whole scripture of this sorcery, all its principal tenets, formulas, medicaments, and mysteries, may be found in what I have collected and printed. Yet I would urge that it would be worthwhile to arrange and edit it all into one work, because it would be to every student of archaeology, folklore, or history of great value. It has been the faith of millions in the past. It has made itself felt in innumerable traditions, which deserve to be better understood than they are. And I would gladly undertake the work if I believed that the public would make it worth the publisher's outlay and pains. So that's Leland's words on that. And to talk about Leland and Aradia, I am honored to have with me Aidan Wachter, who I will ask to have him to introduce himself.
Howdy. Thank you for having me. And thank you for agreeing for playing with one of my favorite and really weird books. Because it really is a strange one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my name is Aidan. Historically, I would have said that I'm a magician. I kind of avoided the witch label for a very long time because it was so, when I came up, it was so specifically kind of culturally owned by Wicca. And I definitely am not, that's not my thing. I have a lot of connections to Anderson Ferry, though. I trained briefly in that before I had an issue that may come up in here because it's kind of related. That put me off the path of getting initiated into that. These days, I would say that I am mostly an animist who practices magic, as the animist side is more important to me at this juncture. I'm not theistic in a normal sense, meaning that I'm not religious about what I do, but I do work with some deities. But I view kind of the range of spirit and deity as being something on a spectrum. I don't put deity higher than my allies, per se. I'm super informed by my allies. I have a very active relationship with them. And I guess the only thing that I would say that's other than that is I think Aradia works for me in part because how I really got into all this stuff was I have like the most classical kind of witch trial spirit initiation path into all this stuff that one could have, which is I had an experience with the Men in Black when I was 11 that led me down this path. So it kind of speaks to me, these older, highly incorrect, messed up mythological folklore smashes of what I kind of view as animist survivals, not religious survivals. That's me.
Awesome. Well, and thank you for being on. I'm super excited to talk about this with you. And my first question usually is like, why this book? But you've kind of answered that. So I will preface this.
We're actually going to go there though, because it's super funny.
Okay. Sounds great.
So don't sell yourself short. Your questions will be good. So I got into magic when I was about 13 to 15. I started looking at it. I would have been 12 when the Spiral Dance came out in 79. I read that within a year or two of there. I got into the runes in 81, 82. Chaos magic, things like that. And in general, I had issue with, as I said, kind of the Wiccan aspects of this, because I didn't really kind of get the connect to the agricultural kind of cycle. It was very heavy at that time as being kind of the most important part. And I found Aradia probably when I was 18 in a store and started reading it. And I'm like, whoa, this book is actually really kind of aggro. We're talking about killing the rich folks, like kind of out the gate. I'm going to take it home. And then as I went on, you find that it's referenced everywhere. But there's a lot of kind of message changing. So that's really what led me to it too. It was like, okay, this is not what I'm seeing. This is something different.
Yeah. And I mean, I think about it's funny you said, because I came a little bit later in my life, and I'm a little bit younger than you. So I hit about 90. And it was kind of that, before the craft and that kind of more, I don't know. I feel like the craft has been so influential in American witchcraft in such weird ways. But yeah, the group that I started with was very Dianic Wiccan, and it did not gel with me at all. And then I was pregnant with a boy child. Well, And I was like, this feels like I need to go somewhere else. So same kind of thing. Like I was just looking for what else was out there. And it's funny about the agricultural nature of Wicca. Like it made sense to me because I grew up in the country and with big gardens and orchards and, so that made sense to me, that part of it. But this duality part didn't set with me. And especially like the, this idea of the triple goddess and kind of like women's relationship to her own body is about her fertility and her relationship to that. And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me either. So yeah, it was the same kind of thing. Like I started there and quickly drifted off into something else. But I did not read Aradia as a book, as a whole, like back to front until now. I've read chunks of it here and there, but I had never read it back to front. And yeah, it is way weirder than I thought. And I recently read, or last year read, Michelet's The Sorceress. And I was like, oh, they were talking to each other, totally talking to each other. Like he's clearly influenced by Michelet quite a bit.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's one of those books that is so, I like things that get a lot of shit by people who are looking for some kind of purity of message, because I don't believe it exists. Like, unless you're talking to that person or crew of people he was talking to, you have no idea what they said.
Yeah.
And as a lot of us who are like me, who are a bit neurospicy, what they said may not be what he heard. Like, this is an incredibly common thing, right? And so I'm not a big believer in objectivity anyway.
Yeah.
And I would agree he definitely was like the Michelet thing. Yeah, that's there. And I think it's interesting too, because it's like there's stuff that's kind of cool about Leland that I hadn't seen framed until I was doing research on him for this chat. Like he fought in a brief revolution in France on that side.
Yeah, I was surprised about that. I came across that too. I was really surprised.
And he fought at Gettysburg on the side of the Union. So this guy he had a life. He had a real life.
Yeah.
It had convictions. And I think that made sense of some things that he kind of maybe leaned more into than maybe what was passed to him about this. Don't know. We don't have those manuscripts. We don't know if they ever existed. But because Aradia is a revolutionary text mixed with a bunch of other stuff, is how I view it. It's like it really is that weird hybrid. Because it's like there's so much magic for sexual coercion that is like so, like, it to my ethic completely wrong.
Right.
Mixed with this very solid kind of like, these people never have cared for the poor or the weak or the downtrodden. And it's okay to do what you got to do to get by. It's a bit vengeful, and not everybody is comfortable with that. But it's very not in it, harm none, do what thou will is not the message of Aradia.
No, that's really not. It's really not. I especially, like, I agree with you, like the coercive romance mode, I feel like is so ingrained. Like it's in the Michelet. There's so much of it out there that I'm just kind of like, it's in the PGM. It's everywhere. So that's not new. He wasn't inventing that. But I mean, I think the thing for me reading it this time was like, I don't really care if she existed. Like to me, that's not the most important thing about this book. I mean, there are some things in the book that I also find, like he does have some weird comments about Jewish people and Black people, and there are some weird things. I mean, there's some weird shit in there. There's definitely racism in there. Yeah. It's very much of the time. That doesn't excuse that, but it is. So it's hard to find anybody being overtly counter that at that time. That's definitely there, though. Yeah, you have like this progression, like kind of toward feminism, and also this racism, anti-Semitism. It's just it is a weird mix. And the story of how it came to be or how he tells it, how it came to be, is interesting. And one of the other things I came across I wanted to ask you about was I guess in the late 80s, the translation from Pagliano, is that right? Talks about that he thinks what is in the book was translated from a dialect of Italian into like, I guess, mainstream Italian or like the, and I was like, that's interesting. And I guess does point to maybe that Leland had access to something, because he said the Italian is so weird that it had to be translated from like a dialect of Italian into this other thing. And I was like, okay, so is that interesting or does it matter? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, we're going to digress.
Please digress.
Because it brings us back in. So the last book that I published is this book, Changeling. And I kind of was fighting Changeling while it was happening. And it was also a really kind of crucial point in my life because it was coming before a very major breakdown, though I didn't know that at the time. But it was the lead into a fairly spectacular few years of carnage. And as I said, my allies are way on me. And it's not like they tell me what to say, but they do kind of download information. And they will get really clear about certain things. And part of it was that the thing that kept coming through is this is a book about witchcraft. And as I said, that was not something I ever publicly allowed myself to claim, because so many people, it was such an important kind of core identity piece for them. And to me, it's something different. And so Changeling is a book that is looking at my thoughts about that. I mean, its working title was The Witch Book. It didn't have a title for a long time other than that. And in the beginning of that, one of the things that I talk about is about Aradia and then about Margaret Murray, and that they're academically both viewed as being essentially discredited. Whether this is valid or not is a separate question. But there was a time when they were taken as very real. Like, this is the best information we have on this. And my take that I talk about in Changeling is, as a witch, I don't care. To me, those books are spells that they regenerated or generated a thing that is incredibly huge. It's this vast working, in a sense, that if you look at it, you go, wow, they actually did. Really, the two of them, and then the people that kind of jumped on that material, generated a whole thing that never existed before. And this kind of goes back into, again, the time. It was really important in the 80s for people to say this is like direct lineal transition or transmission, as if it were like an unbroken initiatory cult, which I've met folks that I don't discount their claims of kind of family traditions, but even their stuff, they kind of admit has been shaped by the other stuff for the most part, the more public stuff. But so, yeah, I view them as like hyper sigils to kind of tie that in. It's like these are kind of, these people created a kind of witchcraft that never existed before, I think, that I think is really beautiful and really powerful. And that to me is way more important than if Madalena existed or if this was a correct translation or any of that. It's like, no, this stuck in people's heads in a way that has done some really amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I've come to it too. And even though I don't consider myself Wiccan, like, I feel like Gardner, like, kind of took these two things and mashed them together with what he'd picked up from Crowley and threw that out into the world. And that's kind of where we are now. Like, all of the tendrils that come out from those, like, he was kind of the conduit, I guess, for mashing all that together. And yeah, like, it's, you know, I guess my thought on it too is like, religion is about myth making, and this is the myth making.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also makes sense because if we look at like, I can't remember if it was on Glitch Bottle or What Magic Is This? I think it was one of the two of those. There's a very interesting chat with Christina Oakley Harrington about Gardner and talking about that Gardner had access to a lot of these kind of survivals of indigenous practices in different places due to his travels. So he actually also understood how it worked in a way that the anthropologist crew or the folklore crew didn't care about. Like they were like, oh, we want the stories, we want the myths. And Gardner had actually seen people do this kind of ritual and was like, oh, if I bring these things together, we end up with something that's kind of like a reformation of kind of an ecstatic, and to use a word that's not popular right now, because with a lot, or at least carries a lot of issues, a kind of pseudo-shamanic religious structure, which also gets lost a lot in the modern world. That's the piece that some people just never connect to. Like, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of talent to like be particularly good at any of this stuff, just like anything else. And it's not inaccessible, but everybody's experience of it is so different. And I think that Gardner was after a very, from the sound of it, pretty intense, ecstatic ritual spaces. Like I have trouble with this as somebody who now functionally is a teacher, though that was never my intention, is to get people to go like, it's okay that some of the stuff you do takes 4 hours, because it might take you 2 hours to get where you want to get going. And then there's whatever happens next. And that doesn't really fit with our culture.
Yeah, especially, yeah. I mean, I think about that, like we have this idea that ritual is like mass, kind of like this Christianized view of ritual happens and these things happen, and ritual can be almost spontaneous in a way that mass can't be. And I think we do lose that a lot. And I was thinking about the kind of shamanic aspects of it. And I do wonder if that's why there's been in the last few years this pivot to traditional witchcraft, this like more of the Cochrane frame, because I think he picked up on that too from and I wonder if that isn't part of it, and that shift to that.
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense, because I think practically, if we do look at kind of the information we get from, like, I guess, and I'm not bagging on anthropologists specifically, but they're the folks who collected a lot of the information that we have about different cultures. One of the kind of points that I end up working with people a lot on is there's it's kind of, how do you balance, how do we put it? It's like skepticism is one thing, which is different from kind of experiential learning, and people don't always get that. I think, especially around spiritual stuff. And to me, this is very much spiritual practice. And so with any of these things, you don't get to know until you learn enough, or are wired naturally, as some are, to have the experience. You don't know what it is. And no amount of reading gets you there. No amount of talking to people. So I'm always like trying to get people like, just get in there and figure out what you will work with.
Yeah.
Because it may not be, you do this for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year, and you get somewhere. It might be, you got to find the things that you will keep diving into for years. I mean, that was my experience. It's like I had some early experiences, but I wasn't in control of those. That's what really led me to magic, was to get control of those. And then it was kind of quiet for about 10 years. But I kept doing small stuff, and then it really exploded. There was a point where I feel like the allies showed up, or I could finally hear them. And it changed. And it's such a different thing that is not, it's not cool. It's not fast. You don't get to know you're right before you go into it. You don't know that it's going to be good for you before you're in it. It's you don't know how your neurology is going to react to these things. And so it's very tricky. And I do think that that's what, it's kind of what I love about all of the older stuff, is you can see that it did filter through. And I think being attached to the historical accuracy or the direct lineage is kind of it kind of misses the point. of the practices.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of thing.
And I was thinking about like I guess now I feel like there's a lot of people are not working with a teacher or in a coven structure or anything like that. So people are reading books mostly to get information or looking at TikTok or social media or wherever they're getting the information. And I don't want to shit on any of those because I think it all has some purpose. But I do think, like for me at least, I too had those really early experiences of not being in control of what was happening and some recreational pharmaceutical experimentation that ended in very weird places. And then when I started reading books about it, I was like, oh, that's not what I mean, because it was so different than what had happened that I was like, oh, that must not be the same thing. And that like just tamped everything down for so long until I realized like, oh, their experience was just different than mine. Like I would put so much authority on the way this person described it in the book that I had taken away my own agency about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's my main interest as someone who talks about this stuff is really trying to make sure that is trying to get that sense of agency in particular and kind of sovereignty as the overview back into people. And then as we talked about before we started, like the permission to go like, your experience of this shit is probably going to be really different, especially from the people that you might just actually meet in the world, because you're only going to meet a certain number of folks. And this was like, it was kind of the beauty of how I came up, because I came up in, like I said, Anderson Feria Touch and had a lot of connects there. And then ceremonial magic and chaos magic that I did with groups is I got to watch, go like, what happens in ritual space to these people is different than what happens to me. And that doesn't mean that I'm having the wrong experience or they are. And it was also like a really interesting revelation that hit at one point that I'm like, ooh, almost everybody else has a similar experience to each other, but not to what's happening to me. And that's when I began to figure out that the allies were very active with me. And they were like, ooh, we've got him in a space, we can do stuff with him. And they would kind of take over. And this wasn't happening to most of the people that I knew, or at least nobody was talking about it. And it's interesting too, because it's like I also, to kind of bring it back to the Aradia thing, we're also kind of post-craft and then especially post-witch talk and all that. It can be really hard for people to understand how intense the move was to make, and we'll just keep using the term witchcraft because it's a specifically witchcraft book, non-threatening. And so for those that don't know, but know more on the kind of Wicca or modern witchcraft end than this, like the charge of the goddess in all of its forms is largely derived from Aradia. But that aspect in there where it says, be naked in your rights until all your enemies and oppressors are dead is really hardcore in it. And that's what I think is really interesting, is they're saying you can't expect these people who want to destroy you to not want to destroy you. And so you got to do what you got to do to survive. And I think that's a really important message. And we can see this historically among the Jewish people. We can see it currently among the Palestinian people. Absolutely a huge effect on all of the various Roma folks. And I think one of the things I really liked about Aradia was the fact that it doesn't even kind of consider that. It's kind of like, nope, this is different. For these folks to be in that much power and want to control you, there's not a middle ground. They're not interested in middle ground. And so we don't go to middle ground, whether you want to go where they're going or not, which isn't my path. But it's very interesting on that. And it's hyper anti-elite, which I think is really interesting in this moment where we're seeing kind of the most naked form of those folks going like, oh yeah, what's the non-player characters. Like if you're viewed as a non-player character by somebody, they don't think you have any rights. So you shouldn't be treating them or any power. And so you shouldn't be treating them like someone who does,
Yeah, I do think it has a lot to say about the moment we're in that regard. And I thought it was interesting. I noticed, like, I think maybe in the bibliography for Changeling, you talk about the new Aradia series that Laura Tempest Sackcroft did and kind of referenced that book. And I was like, yeah, like it is it got lost, I think, in that we have to be the upright neighbor approach to witchcraft in the 80s and 90s during the Satanic Panic, which, I do think the craft and witch talk have kind of moved us out of that. But I think we're kind of still in the Satanic Panic, or we've kind of dipped back into that. So I think there is this.
I think we definitely are. Yeah. I think it's or we're on the edge of it. And for those of us that lived through it,
it's just like QAnon is the same thing in different packaging.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people are talking about it, but you can kind of look at the list in any kind of time like we're in now, and so here you can go, okay, prime targets for public hate and vilification and abuse are kind of immigrants, whether legit or not, whether legal or not. That's not a thing that is important to these folks. Obviously, the trans community is the first chunk of the LGBTQ community that they're going after. If this rolls the whole way it would like to, and given who's in charge, like, no, there's a point where the kind of pagans and magic users, you're on the list.
Yeah.
That's this whole idea of separation of church and state, or the right to believe what you believe, should not be taken as anything that is solid. And it never has been anywhere. All states eventually kind of choose to dominate these things.
Yeah. I think I don't know, it's been, I don't want to go too far into politics, but
yeah,
I mean, we can, but I just feel like I could get lost in that rabbit hole. Like the thing that's been disheartening to watch, I guess, is like the other folks on the list push people under the bus right now. And I'm like, once the fascism machine is rolling, it doesn't stop. Like, unless we stop it altogether, it's not going to just go, oh, I've had enough fascism, I'm not going to bother you. Like, that's not how this works.
Oh, no. And I think it's also really interesting, and we'll bring it back to Aradia as it relates to this, is one of the things that I got from rereading this, because I reread it this week too, because it's been a few years, was it kind of very specifically points out the kind of folk use in predominantly Catholic states of Mary as the cognate form of Diana, and kind of specifically, it's like almost literally, and she's up here for me now. She's recently showed up, straight up as kind of a witch goddess, in another form. Wearing the clothes of the dominant power. Which is also super interesting in what we're talking about, kind of that shift in traditional witchcraft. There's also been a huge rise of folk magic in recent years, which is more in line, and it makes sense that it is more aligned into what's being discussed in Aradia, which is really using power, whatever power you have, against the powers that would do you harm, and that idea that kind of whoever are the weak, the oppressed, the outcast, are who she is there for, which I think is the what I'm seeing, and probably why some of the spirit energies that are in place and that have shown up in my life recently are really talking about, is they're explicitly like, no, there's a point in where empire gets rolling in a particular direction that there has to be a counter force, and whether that is this kind of folk magic Marianism or more overtly kind of European witchcraft, it's that moment.
No, I think that's true, and I have been fascinated with the that other shift to folk magic, especially kind of Christianized folk magic or how maybe older folk magic got filtered through Christianity or is born of it. So, yeah, I think all that is very fascinating, which I think makes a lot of older pagans a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's also interesting, and I'm going to lose it because that's the way my brain is these days. I think as long as we can kind of, like, even more than it used to be, the kind of beauty of the kind of soundbite level of social media has made people, in my mind, super comfortable with, like, really hard line statements about things, where I think all of this stuff really thrives on ambiguity. And that's all that I would say about that, is it's like, we know that, Hutton talks a lot about in, I can't even remember what his book is called. Triumph of the Moon. Ronald Hutton. He talks about how that language of the old religion was used in post-Reformation for Catholicism.
Right.
And that's kind of something that was adopted from that space, most likely, where it shifted in some people's minds as to speaking of these kind of pagan survivals or folk magic survivals or folk religious survivals. Is super interesting. I was interested to see in rereading again the very common practice among kind of folk Catholicism practitioners of kind of torturing and punishing the gods or threatening them heavily, like you bury your saints and stuff, statues and stuff. I had forgotten that was in there.
Yeah, I had forgotten too. I had read about that before, and I was like, oh, I forgot that was like a big part of this. Or at least he talks about it, about, like, oh, you have to threaten that you're not going to give them your offerings and your time and your attention, and, which
is very interesting. I have such a strong, I'm a big believer in kind of symbiosis and reciprocity, and I almost strictly work with the beings that I call my allies, which take a few different, not forms, but a few different tracks. And that's a no-go. It's a non-starter. And it's not my inclination anyway. I always want to be like, what can we do together that would be cool? But it is very traditional in some ways. But I tend to think that it's a late thing.
I don't know. I mean, I wonder, because there's also like a lot of like Roman, like Pliny talks a lot about like parsley and basil growing better if you curse it when you plant it. So like, I don't know if that was like that they were cursing the plant spirits or the gods when they did that. Like some of it I think is really old, and some of it
I think that's really, I consider Roman and Greece recent. So
well, that makes sense. Okay, I see. Just the timeline, yeah. So maybe it comes from there, but yeah, like
pre-Neolithic is old to me.
Yeah. So, well, okay, that is completely fair.
Yeah, it's interesting though. But that thing is a very interesting one because it also indicates, and he does mention it in the appendix. He says, his view on that is that it was a way of saying that you are not so far above me that I can't bargain with you.
Right.
Is kind of how I read what he talks about in the appendix.
It kind of changes the idea of what a deity is. It's kind of like what you talked about at the beginning about a deity is maybe just on the same level of a spirit.
Right. And so there's a way in which you could almost move that and go like, okay, that is kind of how people deal with each other. And so is that really kind of what we're looking at, is like this is the interesting enough form of that, or the edgy enough form or tasty enough form of that we remember it? Because again, the boring shit never gets written down. It's
our brains are wired to remember the negative.
To remember the negative. The fact that I am consistently like, no, I have a really fucking good and consistently excellent relationship with all the spirits that I work with. And that doesn't happen in our world, isn't tasty. for most people. Now, there's people that are going to go like, oh, good.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have this kind of hostile, defensive, do I have to boss you around or do I have to be scared of your relationship? And so, those folks get attracted to what I do. But a lot of people are probably like, oh, this is just way too chill to be entertaining.
No, I am definitely I'm not interested in having an antagonistic relationship with my spirits, whatever form their name would assume they take. I mean, I feel like I get enough of that in reality. I don't need that in my ultimate reality, I guess.
Exactly. Well, and I think it's also, I think if we look at kind of the big three Western religions, they have a lot of really odd, to me, and I'm not a scholar of these things, so this is just a regular person that didn't do a lot of school, perception of these things. But coming at it from as a practitioner sense, there's not much that I find attractive within those kind of top-down rulership scenarios any more than I want to be the one bossing around the spirits. Both are completely non-starters for me. I've had spirits show up like, hey, I'll give you everything if you do whatever I say. And it's like, fuck off.
Not interested.
Not interested. I've tried to date people like you before and it doesn't work.
Also, I think I think that appeal to a base nature that us getting everything we want is good for us is dangerous.
It super is. It super is. Well, and I also think that there's like, I'm working on a book now with some spirits that showed up recently that are, I think, are probably directly related to this kind of Aradian current, though they haven't said that explicitly yet. On some stuff really looking directly at kind of the function of empire in the grandest sense, as like a, not specifically talking like Roman or Chinese or American empire, but like the actual kind of almost energetic gestalt that underlies those behaviors. This isn't about size or duration or anything. And so we could see what's happening now in the modern world as the shift in the way that money is generated and held has formed a different kind of imperial concept that we're kind of dealing with right now. It's inherently abusive because of that idea that I am so special that all that matters is the things that I want. And it's legit for me to take them from you or kill you to get them or subjugate you because that would be fun. To me, all of that speaks to empire and that imperial impulse. And so I think witchcraft in this sense, and specifically the Aradian kind of edge of this, is really speaking directly to that of like, now we get to have good lives simply because we're alive, not because we're of use to you. And it also is a good one that's related to stuff that I've been teaching about in a class that I was just finishing up this week, which is all of these kind of top-down control structures do this by laying out a board, and kind of in my description, it's like a chessboard, right? And saying, this is the world as it is, and I just happen to have all of the army and all of the money and all of the pawns to do what I want, and you have nothing. And so since this board that I've laid out is reality, you're fucked. And to me, witchcraft is saying, I don't accept the board. I don't believe the board is real in the sense you want me to think that it is. And so I believe that witchcraft is an incredibly powerful antidote to that in the form that kind of this Aradian current or what we've been talking about. It's literally saying, no, I don't play that game. I always think of that Soft Cell song, Tainted Love. It says, the line in there that says, you say love is to pray, but I'm sorry I don't pray that way. It's kind of I'm sorry, I don't play that way is kind of the message of Aradia.
I like that. So like weaving in a pop culture reference like that too. Yeah, it's so interesting to me because I kind of what we talked about earlier with this idea of non-player characters, like that, money, which mostly is made up money that doesn't exist, gives you some inherent worth over anybody else on the planet. It has always been a struggle for me to understand how people even get to that concept. But seeing it writ so large right now. Yeah. Seeing it writ so large right now. Yeah. And to be in the moment, I think, yes, to look at it. And it goes kind of back. One of the things that I have struggled with in like our moment we're in right now is like, what am I doing in the face of this? Like what is my role here? And, I'm trying to write a book. I have my cast, I make dinner, like what are these things in the face of what we're, looking at with what these people want? And at the same time, I'm like, that is exactly what they don't want. They don't want, crawling up in the fetal position and giving up is complying in advance. And,
yes.
Like continuing my practice, continuing to make art, whatever form that takes, that it directly flies in the face of them considering me an NPC. So.
Right. Well, and I think it's super important because it's also, it's really, and this is, not everybody will agree with this at all, but I don't expect people to agree with me. And I don't agree with most people about everything either. That's normal. The thing we're not supposed to know is that actually just living your life to the best you can is the only reason we're here. It's been all turned into how do you feed the machine, right? You listen to a lot of the political folks in particular parts of the spectrum, and that's their whole thing. It's like these people aren't providing enough to the system, and the system isn't life. Life is life, and what we do is we try and not fuck each other over too much. And try and arrange a system where you don't have to fuck people over to survive, and make art and take care of each other. This is of zero value to the folks that want control, because they're like, no, what's your output that I can skim? And it's like, maybe we get to the point where we don't have any output that you can skim, and maybe that's maybe that's the goal. If that's all that matters to you, maybe we opt off. And again, that's to me stepping off the board. You go, no, I don't believe that this is black and white. I don't believe it's squares. I don't believe it's this size. I don't believe the rules are as they are. I don't believe you when you say I can't do what makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to pull in another pop culture reference, I think I've seen this several times lately, and I keep coming back to it in my own brain about that Mary Oliver quote about what are you going to do with your one wild life, and her decision was to go on walks with her partner and write poetry. Like that's what she chose, and that's what that poem is about. Even though people make it this like, what mountain are you going to conquer to prove yourself to yourself and the world? You don't have to do that.
No, I mean, it's super fascinating because it actually even goes back into there's points in Aradia where he talks about narrative in a way that I did not remember, because that's a big part of my approach, is all these things, these ways of living, whether it's witchcraft, whether it's empire, whether it's crypto, are narrative devices. They're stories. Very few of them have any relation. Yeah. And it's interesting. I have notes that I'm kind of looking at. One of the things that I found pretty interesting in Aradia too, and this is very present in a lot of folk magic as well, is again kind of the sexual coercion aspects. And I was so like, oh, well, that never went away. We stopped talking about it. And a lot of people wish we never would, but that's very present in this, and it's present in every kind of spiritual community that I'm aware of. But I thought that was an interesting one, kind of viewing it again as like, what's the imprint of these kind of documents or these thought streams or these mythologies? And I thought that was that one stuck out on me. And I had that experience as I was studying witchcraft, that the teacher that I connected to was very much like, if we're going to do this, we need to get it on. And I was like, well, then we're not doing it, and they went fucking crazy, but as sometimes people do.
Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah. But, it's like, that's not gone.
I did find it interesting that the last story, I think in the appendix, is about, oh gosh, I don't want to tell the whole thing, but basically the guy is obsessed with this woman and like goes to put a ladder up against her house to take her at night in her bedroom or whatever, and is stopped by this older woman who turns him to stone. And then the whole rest of that is not him like getting what he wanted exactly, but he has to like completely change who he is. Like he has to go learn all of these things. He has to encounter the goat and a bull and, do all these things. And then by the time he comes back to win her, he's a different person who then gets the girl in the end, but not from force, but having to actually like go to therapy, I guess.
Good shit.
So I was like, it's interesting that that's the one, that's the coercive one that it kind of ends on. And I was like, that to me is maybe the direction it should go. I mean, it's still not perfect because he still starts out as just a botherer, but
yeah,
it's interesting that the narrative is so different in that one.
Yeah, no, there's and it's also it's how do you put it? It goes back to that thing that we were talking about before, that if you look at the way that media works, media likes damage. And I think that that's true historically. I don't think that's a new thing. It just was a different kind of media. And so you don't get a lot of awesome stories about this awesome person fell in love with this other awesome person and was awesome to them, and therefore they got married.
Yeah.
Or got together or whatever. And so it's also, you got to take it all with that sense of like, I think even a lot of oral traditions like focus on scandal, like what's the thing that'll make people engaged? We have to kind of, I think, filter that shit, because we all a lot of us carry that. We're like, there's a particular, it's again kind of the modern thing. It's the belief I have to look a certain way or be a certain way, or the weird through line from like what was that whole fucking horrible men's dating thing? Oh, The Game. The Game, through Gamergate, through everything else, through QAnon to whatever else you got. You go, yeah, this is just a particular narrative of this is how I could have control over my situation, which almost never has to do with getting control over yourself.
No.
It's like, which to me is what magic and witchcraft are for. It's like, no, it's like, these are tools, yes, to connect to spirit. And in my sense, this is very literal, to connect to spirits. But a big part of the drive that sends people to these things is, how do I get what I want when I can't see a path to it? And usually it's that last version in Aradia. It's like, usually you go and do your work and you figure out in what ways are you being in your own way, in what ways do your behaviors not, I'm a big believer in cause and effect, and you have to figure out where your causes are not bringing you the effects you want.
Yeah, I've done so much research for this book that I'm working on about folklore and folkloric magic, and looked at like PGM and the Picatrix and more modern, even more recent stuff, and like there's so many like if you look at, there's so many of those charms, those coercive sexual charms, mostly aimed for men or people perceived as masculine against women or people perceived as feminine.
Yes.
And then on the flip side of that, there's all this folk magic and charms and stuff for women to figure out who their husband is going to be, or to figure out how to keep their husband. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, what it boils down to in this weird way is that there's that coercive thing to bend women to a will. And then the other flip side of it is like, how do I keep from starving to death because I'm not allowed to own a house in my own name? Who is going to be the person that allows me to live? And I was like, that is so dark to look at that and go, well, how far have we come? And what is that? Where does that put us now? These two kind of weird strains of this.
No, and it's super interesting because it's like you can see that like the drives remain generally the same, and I think culturally where we fail over and over again is in not addressing the things that actually change those scenarios. Like it should be a no-brainer at this point in time that you go, okay, 8 billion people moving into kind of robotics and shit like that. There will not be enough jobs for everybody. So we kind of either have to adapt to people dying in the street or dying wherever we lock them up, or we have to take care of each other. Why that is not a no-brainer that you go for that we take care of each other is mind-boggling to me, and it always has been. It's a conversation I have all the time with people. It's the one thing I will talk to people I do not know about endlessly because I'm just fascinated. Like, how can you not see that that's an option? Because in general, they say that's not the way the world works. And it's like, well, we are the way the world works.
Yeah. I, a while ago, had an opportunity to talk. I was trying to do some work in Slovenia and had an opportunity to talk to their cultural minister in an interview. Like, I got a chance to talk to her, and I'm forgetting her name. I will try and look it up and put it in the notes. But we were just kind of talking about the world after we'd kind of finished our business. And I cannot remember how we got to it, but Slovenia has like a native bee that it's only found in Slovenia, this carnelian bee. And she was talking about that they had outlawed all these pesticides in Slovenia specifically that were negative to bees, and that they keep finding like people who are buying it off Amazon from the United States and using it, and they have to find them and all this. And she just looked at me in the most solemn way and said, they're going to be so surprised when they figure out they can't eat money.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, it has stuck with me. Like, I should have it tattooed somewhere because
absolutely.
It's just like one of those phrases. Like, and she was, she didn't even comment on it further. That was like her whole summation of it. Was they're going to be so surprised when they can't eat money.
And to me, that is this thing that we keep talking about, which I think this is like, it all syncs up to it, is like, there isn't a way, would be the summation of all of my kind of rampaging anti-imperial brainstorming with some of the spirits, is it comes up, it's like, you don't win that game and you don't change that game. And to me, it's because that game is pathological. It's actually an illness that has to be addressed directly. You don't get to go, oh yeah, well, we understand that you're terribly ill and whatever. Like, that doesn't work. You actually have to go at it. If you were hoarding
trash or pets, we would have an intervention.
Yeah, exactly. If you have 1,000 mice in your house because you really love mice, we're going to do something about it. And I think we're at the time for that. And it's just a question. It's like the whole game of empire is, can we solidify control before everybody realizes that? And to me, that's what I think. It's what sent me into magic in many ways, though I had, like I said, spirit contacts that connected me to it early on. But the thing that kept me there was like, this is speaking to a different way of being in the world that addresses that it's us. It's us in relation. It's us in relation to each other. It's us in relation to the world as it actually is. It's us in relation to the spirits. It's us in relationship to the dead. I have strong connections to very old line ancestries. But even if that is not a direct thing for people, it's very clear that we're inheritors of the world and the thought processes that came before. And if they don't work, and if they have never worked, trying to continue to just fudge things a little bit to see if you can get another 6 feet down the road doesn't actually make sense. And to me, what does is you go, yeah, different board, different game. What's that game look like? And let's start playing that game.
Yeah. I think it's requires maybe more imagination than force.
I totally agree with that.
Like what comes next? What does that look like?
What does it look like? And also, I think where the idea of looking at certain kind of, it's funny because the folks that want to, the inclinations to the method that makes sense tend to fall into the wrong hands, is what I would say. And so we do have folks that will look at all sorts of social behaviors that do no harm to anyone, and they will pathologize those. And yet the folks that are kind of inclined towards mutual aid are very afraid of doing that, which is a wise thing. It's a correct thing. But there is a point where you have to look at certain things and go, that's not well. And we can't listen to that story. And we do have to generate a new story. It's not about, can we make the next episode be slightly less horrific? It's like, what's a totally different story?
Yeah.
And I think that's to me the task at hand is everybody that's kind of on board figuring that out and living that. Because you don't really get to impose story on people successfully. It goes weird.
Yeah.
And so you have to really have it be something that people witness working and then come to see the value in, which is tricky right now.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. No, I think that is ultimately true. Like even when people have been subjugated in the past, I mean, we know survivor stories that they continued to live their life in their head. No one can take that from you, and living it out loud is the second step of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. And I think there's a beauty in moments that are like this, as well as all of the kind of horrific things, because it knocks out so much of the kind of distraction chatter, if you let it, to just go, okay, we have mass levels of noise. What's the signal? And what's the signal that I want to amplify? What's the signal that I want to share? What's the wavelength I'm going to be living on? And can I share that with other people that it makes sense to? And understand there's a bunch of folks that are just not ever going to be able to see things that way because it's ingrained. It's also, I mean, I view magic and witchcraft as deconditioning tools. In that they let you see, like, oh, what are my beliefs that seem really solid, but I can do these things that are very counter to, and I actually get results.
Yeah.
Things actually show themselves to work a different way. And a lot of times people don't actually then go back and like go, okay, so what's the story now? Like, this would be the thing that I would hand to everybody that's ever had a spell work, is like every time or a ritual work, is every time that happens to go, what does this tell me about the nature of my reality now? Because we often just take it and go like, cool, that worked, next. And it's like, ooh, but that probably should have changed your entire viewpoint.
Yeah.
Depending on where you started, of course. But
yeah, I mean, for me, it's that, that always skeptic part of my brain, like magic isn't real because that would be silly, like that material function. And then things happen and, either I think of my doing or of the cosmos's doing, however you want to look at it. I'm like, oh, I don't know as much as I think I do. That's always it's always my reset. It's like, oh, I still have more to learn.
It's funny, when last year I decided I was going to befriend the crows that live around me. And so I started feeding them, and I fed them for a few weeks. So they started coming out when I would go out if they were around. So I started telling them, I'm like, here's the deal now. You have to knock on my door and I'll feed you. I said this out loud, and I said it out loud to them for maybe 2 weeks. And now in the morning, they knock on the roof directly above my door. Like, to that degree. They totally get it. It's like, that's what I wake up to almost every day, is somebody tapping up there. So it is it silly, or is that the way that the world has always worked? And my argument is, or the story that makes sense to me is, if I look at all of the kind of survivals of non-messed up folklore, meaning that I can't see how, a lot of folklore or folk tales, not folklore so much, but specifically folk tales, I view as, at least the European ones, I see a lot of specifically anti-magic messaging in there. But if we look at that, if we look at a lot of indigenous cultural ideas, you go, I think this is the way that the world really works. And again, that kind of pathology of empire gains power by saying, no, you're confused. It actually works because I'm really awesome and I should have a quarter of your crop.
Well, you even see it in the transition into Protestantism. The thing that they railed against was the paganism of Catholicism and the magic and the mysticism. And that's what they wanted to strip out. I'm like, that's the best part. Why would you want that gone?
Well, and that's what I was. That's exactly my point. Is it's like, no, that's the reason you want that gone is because people that actually have a real connect to the world and a real connect to spirit and a real connect to each other do not give a fuck about you and the fact that you think you should be in control. And so, I view what's going on now is it's aggressively anti-magical in all forms, and it's almost like I view the corruption of a lot of folks go. There's a chunk of the Christian, what I would call culturally Christian folks, who are aligned now with very anti-Christian values, and I would say that is explicitly intentional, because you got to break that if you want to have them be controllable, and so you need to kind of fuck their connection to God up. In whatever form that was, or the
it's
gods. It's
not the Sermon on the Mount. It's empathy as a sin.
It's empathy as a sin, and it's explicitly done to break that connection. Because straight up, if everybody who thought of themselves as a Christian was operating from the teachings of Christ, we would not be doing what we're doing right now. And there would be, whatever it is, 700 very sad billionaires that aren't billionaires anymore. And to me, that seems like a very reasonable goal.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. I mean, I think, I think what you said about there's opportunity and beauty in this moment if we find it. It's hard to see that because it is so awful and so many people are hurting and will continue to hurt until we figure this out. But it is an opportunity to change the story.
It is. And it's the advantage. Yeah, if I see an advantage, there is an advantage that this fantasy, particularly the American fantasy of self-reliance and the fantasy of the acquisition of wealth as proof of objective betterness, dies. And that's some of my work is absolutely focused on that. Like, no, there's a point that this could have a beneficial end game, even though it's going to ruin a lot of people on the way.
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy way out of this moment. I don't think so either. It is, I don't know. I think a lot of the perceived curse of may you live in interesting times. Like, yeah,
it's more interesting than I want it to be.
Way more interesting than I want it to be.
I just want to wander around in the woods and talk to the birds.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like what you said about our story is wired for conflict. I mean, we even talk about narrative that way, like man versus man, man versus that's the thing. And it's like I kind of just want what the non-trad wife cottagecore people want. Like that's kind of the life I want. So.
And I think it's interesting too, because it's like, I don't get how people don't understand that, even though I believe there's part of what happened is I think that the population here worldwide expanded way too fast for us to adapt to.
Yeah.
And to really think logically about what that meant. Like, there needed to be some discussions before we doubled and doubled and doubled as we have. But I think there's no, I can't see any actual reason why there's an issue. If we say the game is not the game that you believe it is, and that you tell us that it is, and you try and enforce that it is, the game is, we're going to be all right. Yeah. And if enough people decide that that's the game, we can do this.
Yeah.
It's not undoable.
There are more of us than there are of them.
There's way more people that just want to have a good day and a good life and to see their children well, and their friends well, and hopefully not die horribly along the way. That we can have it be different. And I think that's rather than seeing if I can, curse my neighbor's horse so I can have a one-up on him, or turn his daughter into a dog so that she can come to my room and I can molest her and then send her home not remembering it, which is in the book.
Weird. That's so weird. That one, God, I was just like,
seriously, what the fuck? Yeah.
Like, dude, if you did make this up, you need therapy.
Yeah, that one was the one that I was like, dude, okay. But, we have the option to like seriously kind of magic into existence very different narratives. And I think that to me, that's the game. It's like, okay, let's generate every version of a game that says, oh no, that was a really dumb experiment that we did for a couple hundred or even a couple thousand years, on however you want to perceive it.
Yeah.
Let's do something fun and interesting and beneficial.
Yeah. I'm here for it. So kind of to pull us back even more to the book itself and kind of that work. So for you, like if you were telling someone, I mean, because I feel like one of the things that was interesting when I was coming across my research for this was that so many people pointed out this is never a book people recommend people read anymore. Like when they're talking about, oh, you're new to witchcraft or magic, go read this book. Like it's almost never on anybody's list anymore. So what other perhaps problematic classics would you recommend in addition to Aradia? I mean, couched in obviously that these are not to be taken as gospel and that there are problematic parts to them, but that there is value.
I have to think, because I do generally steer clear of things that I have a really limited attention span. So if you're not, if you don't catch me pretty early anymore, I don't go. But I read a lot of stuff. I think that I know, because I've run across it, there is a general books that suggest that magic will give you power over other people. And there's a vast range of them.
Yes.
This is present in folk magic. It's present in varieties of witchcraft, chaos magic, Satanism. There's things you can learn from those books often, but realize that is not, to me, a viable path. And to read from the perspective that what you read might be interesting, and that you might gain something that is entirely different from the message that is intended to be shared from it. I don't want to bag on anyone because everything is a door into a different space. And a lot of people that start with very bad books end up in very good places. But, I think it's really useful more. What would I say? Realize that there is a pressure on authors in mainstream publishing to present themselves as experts and present themselves as the way and what they share as the way. Understand that that's present in the editorial process. It's not even necessarily what the author would have written, but if they want to get published, that's present. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting folks on the margins, but these are not the books that you're generally going to find in the stores as much. I'm a huge fan of Lee Morgan's work, and I always recommend their book, Standing and Not Falling. It's funny because it's like the list gets pretty short over time unless I know who specifically I'm speaking to.
Yeah, and I think that does matter too. Like the recommendations are personal.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't recommend my books to everyone. I think that they're very focused in a sense, and even among them, I wouldn't recommend them all to the same person necessarily. And it'll be interesting when the next books come out because they're very different. I've got 2 that I'm in process with, and they're very different from the previous ones, and that will not be popular with some folks, and some people will be like, "Yeah, cool."
But I do appreciate. I mean, one of the things I appreciate about your work is you're doing your work, and I get the impression from other interviews with you and from reading the books that is the most important for you. Not, do I sell 1 million copies? That's not what this is about.
No, I wouldn't know how to do that. I really wouldn't, because it's all I got is me and the peeps and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. I did not, as we've talked about before, I did not expect to have anything like the impact with what I've written at any point. And it's an oddity. So, I didn't come in for that. And so I wouldn't even know how to do that. I think that there's people that do roll in and are often successful going, okay, I know what the market is. Like, I thought the market was like 50 people or 100 people. I'm
guessing you probably sold more books than 50 though.
I have. A freakishly large number of books for someone who did not expect to be selling books. To me, that's the thing. Is it's like a big part of what I do is really, it's a word that you used before we started recording, is like me and the peeps. Part of our thing is like give as many people who are connected but can't find something that like really meshes with them, that don't want to buy into a whole system or into a whole identity that matches, everybody else, permission to find their own way. And the only way I know how to do that is go like, hey, this is stuff that I find interesting and that has worked for me, and see. And maybe some of it'll stick and some of it won't. And I don't think that I don't know any other way to do it.
And I mean, listeners know that there's always the pre-conversation, but one of the things Aidan and I talked about was that going back and rereading my notes from 6 Ways before our conversation was how many things had just filtered in to my perception that I hadn't even realized, even maybe remembered were from your book. And I think to me that is the power of reading someone else's experience rather than this is a ritual trapped in amber. This is how you do this thing. Is like, no, this is what works for me. And this is my experience with your allies, with, whatever your perception is. And some of those pieces will just make sense and some won't. I mean, I don't think I've done any of the rituals from 6 Ways. But so much of the conversation around those has informed what I do think about other things. And so I think there's real power in that. And I think you writing outside of that mainstream editorial process was to your benefit.
No, I absolutely think so too. It's how I feel about Lee. Like Lee Morgan's work is deeply kind of invested in fairy lore and other stuff, and Lee is a fantastic writer. But what I get from Lee is mostly like I have a very deep respect for their voice, and their willingness to like really share a lot of stuff that's not comfortable to a lot of people, but I think it's very well done and important. And that's always what I'm looking for in books. It's like I've read in the first 10 years that I was practicing, I read everything I could get my hands on, which was a lot less than it is now. And so it's like I don't really care about your techniques for the most part. I don't really care about your spell. I want to hear your voice and see your life on the page, because that's what I can learn from. I can learn from you, the person, more than I can learn from you, the teacher. And I try to do that as well in what I write. Is like if I start getting too teachy, it's like, okay, I need to go do something else for a few months and then come back to this.
Yeah, I do like that idea that kind of learning from each other as people, like the non-hierarchical nature of that to me it goes back to that interconnectedness and supporting each other, mutual aid, like all of that makes sense to me. Just I guess as an outlook on life in general, like we're all walking the same direction ultimately.
Yeah. And I think it's just it opens up so much if you're not looking for writers to be necessarily right about everything or that you agree with them, but like, is this interesting? Does this have me think interesting things? Does it shape how I view the day or the week or the month? And those are the people that have the biggest effect on me. I always talk about Jan Free's visual magic, which was hugely formative to me, not so much on the technique end. It was like I could feel him through that book. It was like, yeah, I like this guy. And it affected how I did everything after that. There was something that I just picked up based upon who he was in that book. And that's far more important to me than any initiations anybody's had or anything like that. And I'm super interested in people's spirit contact. So, because it's such a fascinating world, to see how different it is, for folks. And that's really cool. And it's really important. One of the things that I'm super non-gifted as far as kind of what we talk about the clairs. I'm not clairvoyant. I'm not clairaudient. But I've figured out how to kind of work with the peeps. Anyway, I'm aphantasic. I do not visualize at all. Even on heavy drugs, I didn't hallucinate in general. And so I didn't have any of the kind of talents that are assumed one would have. And yet I've been able to figure out a way to work that works for me. And I think that it's important that people know that all that stuff that it's available, even if you don't think it is because of a lack of natural talent. I don't think I had any natural talent.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a point in 6 Ways when you say, magic's waiting for us in our blood and bones. And I was like, yeah, like that's the fact that you're alive is magic. The fact that you're here in this moment,
it is, and it's part
magic.
of the animal. It's as much of this animal that we are as anything else. I believe that 100%. Otherwise, we would not have evidence of it all the way to now, from as far back as we can see.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't have. And the fact of that it's been useful consistently. Things like this don't really persist that haven't been useful. that shit goes away. During all of the thousands and thousands of years of oral tradition, people stopped talking about it.
And we have never. Even in the dearths, it's
never gone anywhere. It has never gone anywhere.
I will say, for folks who want to read this book, I have had like 0 attention span brain space for printed words. I've mostly been doing audiobooks. And it's actually a pretty easy read. Like, his writing is fairly open to be from the late 1800s. Like, it's not a slog to read this book. It is also short, but he just doesn't. It's
very short.
The density of his language is not like trying to read Frasier, I think.
Oh,
like,
no.
The Golden Bough.
No, he was very much a journalist.
Yeah. So it shows.
Yeah, he was a journalist. And so he really knew how to write to have it be easy to read.
Yeah. So I think if people want to tackle this one, it's a good one.
And I think also it's fascinating if you're connected to witchcraft in any way to read it and go like, oh yeah, this is where that came from.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is where that came from.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe one of the more interesting aspects of it is just going, oh, I forgot this is where that came from. Because I had that over and over again this week. It's like, oh yeah.
I came to so many of these books late. Like, I kind of just got thrown into witchcraft without really doing any historical research, which I think is a lot of people's experience. And so I've come to a lot of these books after years of practice, and it is fascinating to trace those things. Like, like you said, the Charge of the Goddess, largely from Aradia with all of the layers on top of it. And I think, I don't think everyone has to do this. Like, again, I don't think they're universal, but I think if you want to know, if you're curious about that, like, this one is an easy one to pick up because it's not 1,000 pages of the Golden Bough to get through. It's a little bit easier. I mean, even Gardner's writing is difficult. Like, it's very dense and sometimes nonsensical. So I think this is just an easier one to pick up and kind of see those threads than some other stuff.
And there's like thousands of versions of it. You can get them with commentary or without. Mm-hmm. I've never read any of the commentary on it. As far as those books, I've only had the little 115 page paperbacks from the 70s mainly. It's available in PDF and ebook everywhere for free. It's been in the public domain forever.
On ebook, yeah.
Published in 1899, so there's nobody's getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are multiple versions of it on like the Internet Archive that you can just get an ebook of and download. It's an easy one, but I'm glad you picked it. Like, I've wanted to do this book for a long time on the show, so I'm really glad that you chose it.
Yeah, no, I've been kind of like talking Aradia for years. I wrote an invocation for the first of the new Aradia series for that Laura Tempest Cockcroft put out, and she's kind of stayed active in my zone ever since then as a spirit. So I was really lucky happy
to have something included in the most recent one too. So
very cool.
Yeah, it's been, those little books have been close to my heart lately.
They're very cool. I really like those books. I'm a supporter of LTZ in general, but I really like those books. I'm glad that she's been doing those.
Oh, so any kind of final thoughts or anything you felt like you wanted to share that you didn't get to?
No, I think we covered everything. Thank you for having me. It's been a total pleasure.
Oh, it really has. Thank you so much for being on. And listeners will notice this one is a little longer, but I'm completely pleased with that. And I hope people will enjoy it. You can always listen to it in 2 parts.
Split it up. It'll be there.
Split it up. It'll be there. The way to get back. Yeah, I love Jesse Hathaway Diaz and Diaz Hathaway. I always say his name wrong. And Al Cummings' Radio Free Golgotha, but they're like 4 hours long. Like, I have to listen to them over like 3 or 4 days.
Totally.
But I do enjoy them. I like their Sesame Street approach to magic. Well, excellent. Well, and thank you so much. And good luck with the new books. I can't wait to
I can't
learn
wait
more
either.
about that.
I'm hoping one of them will be done soon, but we'll see.
Excellent. And thank you again.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
WitchLit is a production of 1000 Volt Press and is edited by Julian Rashke. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shanekar. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram or Threads at witchlitpod. Please help other witches find us by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening to and reading WitchLit.